It's 6 o'clock. Welcome to this meeting of Derbyshire Dales District Council Planning Committee here in the Town Hall in Matlock on Tuesday, 8th of October 2024. Just by way of welcome to all those who come along to speak to the various items this evening. Thank you very much for taking the time and trouble to do that, and welcome also to those who may be watching live on our YouTube channel. We've no fire practice scheduled for this evening, so if you do hear the alarm, we've two fire exits. One is the doors that you came in through and go down the stairs. The other fire exit is through the doors on my left, on most people's right, through there. If you need the toilets, we've toilet along the corridor to the left if you go out of the main doors, and also further toilets downstairs. And we have drinks and water available in the corridor outside if you need to avail yourself of those, which you're very welcome to do. Some introductions first. My name is Councillor Peter O'Brien. I'm chairing the meeting this evening. I represent the Hathersage area on the District Council. To my left, I've got Councillor David Burton. He's our co-chair. We're missing our vice-chair this evening, Councillor Susan Barefoot. So David's very kindly stepped in to keep me on the straight and narrow this evening. I've got Tommy Shaw from our Committee Services section, who manages the meeting for us on David's left. Got Lucy sitting over on the far left, who's in charge of our IT equipment and visual equipment for this evening. To my right, James Cunningham, who's our solicitor. This is James' first planning meeting, so I hope you'll find it a enjoyable and pleasurable occasion. On the far right is Mark Joyce. He's our principal planning officer. And we do have the space here is Sean Robson, our development manager. He's just gone out to check some information relating to one of the items, so he'll be back in a couple of minutes, I hope. Right. We'll start on the agenda this evening, and our first item is number 1, apologies for absence. Tommy, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillors Barefoot, Archer, Butcher and Edwards-Walker, and we've got Councillor Bates, Councillor Linthwaite and Councillor Shelley here as substitutes.
Item 2, minutes of our meeting on the 10th of September 2024. Tommy, you just got something to say on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. These minutes were previously marked to follow the agenda papers and have been since published.
Would someone like to move approval of those minutes which have been previously circulated, please? Councillor Slack, seconded Councillor Dobbs. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? And an abstention from those who weren't present. That's carried, thank you. Item 3 is interests. Does anyone want to declare any interest in any applications? Councillor Bates.
I'd like to declare a personal interest in 5.2. I live in Clifton village.
Thank you very much. That's right. For members of the public here this evening, I'll explain how we go through the applications if this is the first time you've been to a planning committee. For each planning application we're considering, we invite those of you who've asked to make representations for or against the application to come up and speak at the chair, the loudspeaker there. And then we invite our Gym Development Manager, Sean Robson, or Mars Joyce. They will introduce the planning application, and if possible they'll respond to any of the points that have been made during the representations. Committee members are then able to ask questions of the officers regarding the application, and when we've had those questions we then move into a debate to determine the application. That's the process we follow. Sounds a bit formal, but it's quite straightforward when we get into it. Our first application this evening is at the primary school in Carsington, and we have a number of speakers. We have Mr. Ian Caulfield first, please, as a local resident. Mr. Caulfield is going to speak against the application, and Ian, you have 3 minutes, please.
Good evening. My name is Ian Caulfield, and together with my wife I've lived at Pingle End, the property adjacent to the school, for the last 25 years. In July 2023 we became aware of works being undertaken at the school, and in discussion with the school representative we were told that the school was installing, as part of an upgraded heating system, 7 heat pumps directly facing my property and approximately 4 metres from my boundary wall. Internal works had apparently been undertaken in 2022. No formal planning application or listed building consent for these works had been submitted by the applicant. I wish to thank the Derbyshire Dales planning team for their swift action they took to make the applicant aware of their obligations and to instigate a suspension of the installation activities. Subsequently, a formal planning application was submitted during December 2023, and this reflected the original proposal of 7 heat pumps, double stacked, facing my property. These included a recommended 3-metre high acoustic screen around the pumps, which the applicant subsequently arbitrarily reduced to 2 metres in height for aesthetic reasons. In all my correspondence regarding this proposal, I have never objected to the principle of an upgraded system. My objections are based around the detail of the design to ensure the best outcome for the school community and immediate neighbours. Following a number of objections from the community and the parish council to the December planning application, a revised scheme was submitted by the applicant in June 2024. This relocated 5 of the heat pumps to the eastern facade. This is the basis on what the committee is considering tonight. My ongoing objection to the application is that the 2 remaining heat pumps on the southern facade of the school should also be relocated to the eastern facade or be ground mounted below the other 5 pumps. All the heat pumps would then face towards the school playground and farmland only. There is no technical reason why this is not possible. This would cluster all the pumps together, hence minimising the visual impact on the listed building and setting. Any pumps which remain on the southern facade would be clearly visible from the publicly accessible path running along the side of the school. It would also remove them from the sight line and noise line from my property. I would ask that the planning committee give consideration to this request and thank them for the opportunity to speak at this meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Caulfield. And now I've got Ms. Denise Caulfield, if you'd like to come across.
I wish to object to this planning application on the grounds of noise and loss of amenity. This application is before the Planning Committee because we accidentally discovered the applicant's intention to install 7 double-stacked mechanical pumps without the required planning permission or listed building consent. If the applicant had their way, they would already be there, a done deal. Carsington and Hopton Primary School is part of a small federation of 4 schools with 1 executive headmaster. One of these schools installed a similar system with correct planning consents in 2016 under the current executive headmaster, and I cannot understand why the applicant did not follow the correct procedure required in this instance. I am by nature a trusting person. The applicant and the school they represent, my neighbours for 25 years, have shown such disregard for the due process of planning, a lack of professionalism and common courtesy in this eventual application that they have broken my trust. How do I now believe that they will deliver an optimum project for the school and its neighbours? Indeed, given the lack of competence already displayed prior to this application, that they have investigated all possibilities, so that I may be allowed to retain a much needed peace and tranquility I enjoy in my greenhouse and garden. As stated in my previous written objections to this belated application, 5 years ago, I became significantly unwell with a very rare combination of 2 rare diseases. This has been life-changing for both myself and my husband and poses significant challenges on a daily basis. My world has shrunk to a much smaller place, and in the summer of 2022, we purchased our greenhouse in order to broaden my horizons metaphorically, if not physically. At this time, we were unaware of the preparatory works that had already been completed internally at the school, a listed building. The greenhouse has been significantly life-enhancing for me, and the prospect of my happy place being invaded with a constant mechanical whirring noise is hard to bear, particularly when the school was aware of its own intention and ours before the siting and building of our greenhouse. This is not a partially urban environment, as stated in the application. This is a peaceful, semi-rural community with occasional aircraft and distant traffic noise, which will not mitigate the noise generated by multiple mechanical pumps for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year, 4 metres from my head. In the absence of any evidence from the applicant, we have no idea how this system will be controlled. The school has already established a track record of being unable to set lighting timers. How on earth do we trust that this system will be operated correctly? If only the applicant had talked to us, even once, questions could have been asked, answered, and so much time and expense could have been saved. I fully support the school's need for an effective heating system and hope for a mutual agreeable solution, not just the cheapest. And I'd like to thank our parish council for their unwavering support and the committee for their time.
Thank you very much for that. It's very helpful. Right, we're now going to ask our Development Manager, Sean Robson. Sorry, Mark. Principal Planning Officer.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair. This is the application and installation of air conditioning systems at Carsington Hopton Church of England Primary School. You can see it here on the site location plan. It's located within the conservation at Carsington Hopton Conservation Area. The school building is Grade 2 listed. Carsington is a 4th tier village with limited facilities as defined in policy S2 of the adopted local plan. Full plan permission, as you heard, has been sought to install an energy efficient air conditioning system to replace existing failed oil-fired heating system. It has been through amendments. If you look here, this is the site plan. And there you begin to see the location of the units. There's the floor plan. There's the old oil heater. Another elevation and another of the oil-fired heating systems. And there's the rear area and the boundary. Beg your pardon, going back too far. Now, there has been an objection regarding noise pollution from the parish council. They feel that the amendments mitigate this, but some concerns remain. The local authority's environmental health officer has no objections following clarifications of noise impact hours and height of the acoustic fence. And the conservation officer from a heritage point of view has no objection in principle provided the proposed finish of the fencing be conditioned. There was some significant response from third parties, but there has been amended plans submitted and officers feel that this mitigates the concerns set out. In terms of the issues, the principle is accepted as is within the village boundary. The impact on heritage assets has been considered in terms of the sensitive setting within the Carsington Hopton Conservation Area and the curtilage of the Grade 2 listed building. Location of the proposed development is to the rear of the existing school building, utilising an area which has previously been used for oil storage and plant for the current heating system, which is no longer viable. The changes to amount to less than substantial harm, and the National Planning Policy Framework requires that a test must be done to balance the less than substantial harm against public benefits that may accrue. If the public benefit exceeds the less than substantial harm, then planning permission may be granted as it accords with paragraph 208 of the National Planning Policy Framework. Now, officers do believe that the public benefit does overcome the less than substantial harm by providing an adequate and efficient heating and cooling system in order to maintain a suitable environment for pupils and teachers within a school building. The impact on residential amenity, the assessment concluded a low impact noise level at the closest residential facade to the units. The applicants proposed a 2-metre high acoustic fence to reduce the visual impact of the proposal due to the sensitive location and designated heritage assets. In terms of climate change, it is considered that the proposed retrofitting of an energy-efficient heating and cooling system to the existing school is in accordance with the relevant policy PV7 of the adopted Derbyshire Dales local plan. Accordingly, officers do recommend planning permission ought to be granted, subject to standard conditions relating to time. It should be carried out within 3 years. It should be in accordance with the plans attached to the planning application. That before use, samples of material should be submitted to the local authority and approved by the local authority. I think crucially that there's no operation of the units until the acoustic barrier is in place, and that the hours of operation of those said units is limited to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And to be put in frost protection mode only outside of these hours. Furthermore, there is a condition for a scheme of planting to be submitted within 56 days for approval to the local planning authority and to be carried out in accordance with that approved planting scheme. And finally, a limiting condition which requires a removal of the units only related to this planning permission, which gives the local authority an extra degree of control in terms of future development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miles. And open it up to questions now. I just want clarification, Miles or Sean, at the outset. Just could you confirm that officers were satisfied that a listed building application is not required here?
There is actually a pending listed building application. And that is still pending consideration, and it'll be looked at through the prism of the Listed Building and Conservation Areas Act itself. So there is an accompanying listed building application, but what you have before you is the planning application. This application was the one that was called into planning committee by the board member.
Thank you. So if you could bear that in mind, I think Councillor Hughes, you were first.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, these are technical questions about noise, so forgive me for asking them. The report talks about 31 dB at first floor window level, and then talks about that having a 0 dB, resulting in 0 dB harm, as I understand it. Is that because background noise is at around 31 dB level, and therefore it would be insubstantial?
Well, I mean, it is a technical report which the Environmental Health Officer has perused and considered and given their opinion on, and have suggested conditions which I've outlined and are outlined in the reports. So there indeed will be a certain amount of background noise for a school environment, but the nitty-gritty of the technical details and talking about acoustics, that's really something which we would rightly refer to an expert to comment on, and we would be guided by them. In this case, it's our local environmental health officer.
But in terms, it's written in the report, and there are two numbers. One is 31 dB, and the other is 0 dB, about at the same location. So I'm trying to understand the relationship between the two. Now, 31 dB isn't very loud. It's whisper level of a whisper, so I'm not sure. So it would be akin to could be akin to background noise, although the frequencies may be different from the prevailing background noise because that's likely to be higher frequencies. So I just want to understand because the objections from residents are about harm. Can we be clear that what these two numbers mean, because it isn't clear in the report from that what they mean.
Well, I think you rightly point out that 30 decibels is a very quiet noise, whisper, negligible. But this is technical guidance. This is guidance which we take as we would any other technical guidance to an expert, somebody with greater expertise. If they object, we would take that very seriously. In this case, they're saying with mitigating conditions, it's acceptable. And that's what we are guided by. And that's why we've arrived at that conclusion in our report in terms of harm and the conditions that we are seeking to be attached to the grant of planning permission, which we are recommending.
And did they consider the noise in the garden rather than at first floor window level?
I honestly can't say, because they're the ones who would be the experts in that, and they would consider it what's most appropriate. And they would come, that's why we consult them, and that's why they respond to us, and that's why we're guided by what they have to say in their response.
But clearly they can't answer, you can't answer my questions, therefore they haven't given you enough information, I don't think.
No, I mean, very technical, I'm being quite honest with you here, very technical issues such as ambient sound, background sound at various times, various places, that's for the environmental health noise team to look at, or noise officer to look at and appraise. And we would, as they are the experts, be strongly guided by that, as we would with financial viability. We would be strongly guided by a viability expert, as another example. And that is part of our report. That is why we've arrived at the conclusion we have.
Chair, this is yet another occasion when the experts aren't here before us for us to be able to question. It happens when highways don't ever come to us. The Flood Authority never comes to us. They're both statutory consultees, but we never see them. In fact, as I understand it, the Education Authority didn't even turn up for a planning appeal and to support us in our appeal. So, Chair, I don't understand how we can come to a conclusion if we can't question the experts on this subject matter.
I think we can address that when we come to debate. What I would always recommend to colleagues that if they have technical questions, they put them in advance to officers so that officers can be prepared and, if necessary, ask the technical people to come to the meeting. But we can look at the implications of your question when we come to debate. Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. My question concerns harm. Presumably we're discussing this and it came to us because, unlike an unlisted building for which installing a heat pump is a permitted development, this is a listed building and so therefore has to come and have a planning permission. Correct me when I start to go wrong. But the harm, because it's a listed building, would that not be exclusively on appearance? But we're discussing noise levels. So, in other words, the amenity argument, which is what the noise levels relates to, would that be anything to do with the permitted development? If somebody's heat pump adjacent to your house installed and was noisy, would you be able to object on amenity grounds when planning permission wasn't necessary in the first place? I'm a bit confused as to why we're discussing noise at all, when logically, to me, the harm would be visual, being a listed building. Thank you.
All right. Permitted development rights are essentially plan permission granted by a central government development order. They are subject to caveats. It wouldn't necessarily mean that they would necessarily not need plan permission if it was not a listed building, not in a conservation area. In this instance, plan permission is required. And as plan permission is required, all relevant material planning considerations do need to be considered. I beg your pardon. And in this instance, you've seen the environmental health officer's response. We spoke about it. You've seen the conservation area officer's response, and they are happy that this is something which, taking the test under paragraph 208, which isn't just listed buildings, but it's the setting of heritage assets, Does the lesser substantial harm, if that's found, outweigh, is it outweighed by the public benefits? Now, this scale is a matter of judgment. In our judgment, it is. It is in accordance with paragraph 208. So, in terms of the heritage matters, it is satisfactory, subject to conditions. Likewise, in terms of amenity, it's subject to conditions. I think if we go down the route, what would happen if it was permitted development? Well, it's allowed by central government if it meets the criteria. If it caused a noise nuisance, it could be actionable under the Environmental Protection Act, but that wouldn't be a planning concern. Thank you.
Councillor Buttle.
Thank you very much. I think this one's probably for Miles. I'll do the too easy one first. Can we condition the placement of the two remaining ones that are upsetting Mr. and Mrs. Caulfield? Or do we just have to accept it as it is, like 6 round the corner and 2 where they are?
Through you, Chair, I can come back at that point. If where members to want to condition those 2 units on the south elevation, that they concern to the residents, then the recommendation as it is at the moment would have to fail. Members would have to move refusal for valid material planning reasons, and as highlighted already, the environmental health officers, if it was noise concern, haven't raised an issue for that. Neither has the conservation officer. So it would create a very difficult reason for refusal, or certainly defensible reason for refusal. So to answer your question, no, this application had to be refused.
The second question was, again, referring to Mr. Caulfield's points about the acoustic fencing being reduced in height and the fact that it was originally 3 metres and now it's 2 metres. Could we condition the reapplication of that top metre?
I mean, again, it would boil back to some of the response I've just given you, that the scheme is what is in front of us at the moment. I mean, you could ask, members could ask or move for a bespoke condition to be put on an application to require those details. However, the reduction in height was done through discussions through the case officer and the conservation officer. So the impact on the, as you mentioned already, Council, on the listed building, that was what was considered. Sorry, Councillor Dobbs mentioned listed building. That was what was considered, and that's why that height of that acoustic fence was reduced to what's been presented today.
Thanks very much. And my third version or question or whatever it's query, we're talking about conditioning the usage of the air source heat pumps from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I believe that they are most efficient if they're run 24 hours a day at a lower level to reduce the amount of, to reduce the necessary amount of heat being sucked out and pushed into the building, sucked out of the surrounding areas. And that would actually make them quieter. Do we know whether or not 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. is the best way for us to reduce the local impact? And is that a question for the noise person?
Through you, Chair, to come back on that point, that wouldn't necessarily be a question for our environmental health officers. That's noise acoustics. That will be a bespoke expertise on that point to answer that question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. Could somebody just confirm this is an air source heat pump system?
Yes, it is.
Right, okay. Because it says here, efficient air conditioning system, which is a bit misleading, for me anyway. Yeah, okay. And is there a reason why you didn't have a site visit yesterday? Because I think it would have been probably useful. I couldn't have been there, but was there a reason why we decided not to go?
Prior to the committee, or prior to any committee, obviously there is a number of discussions that are held, one of those being the number of applications that are going to be presented at the forthcoming committee, and whether or not it's appropriate to come to site visit all, some or none. Certainly, what we do here at Derbyshire Dales, obviously we discuss it and look at the ones that are considered to be pertinent and visit those. But there are some authorities out there, and in line with government guidance and PAS guidance, that don't do any site visits. However, we do. But obviously, in this particular instance, that was one that was considered not to be, in this particular instance, appropriate to visit. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. Just one little query. 6.4, well, 6.3, 6.4, have we got 3 objections outstanding now, or is it 9? Is it the 6 and the 3? refers to 9 objections, and the later one on the 24th of the 7th refers to 3 objections. Is it 9 altogether, or have we just got 3 that's outstanding
No, I mean,
now?
that's 6 to the first iteration, which is the 4th of June, and 3 to the latest amendment, which is the 24th of July. So it's 3 outstanding.
3 outstanding, so it's not... Yeah, so just them 3. Right, thank you. And I'd like to come back and debate with my little, not expertise, knowledge, but I will come back and debate. Thank you.
So Maelstrom.
Thank you, yes. Do we have a picture of the units themselves and a plan showing where they'll be in relation to the property and the neighbours?
I mean, I can verbally say there was 7 units in the south and east elevations, an extended southern section of school buildings, and 2 larger and 3 smaller units on the east facing elevation. And remaining 2 smaller units to be floor mounted on the south facing elevation. And then the acoustic fence around the west and south of the site.
Right, sorry, I'm just really not clear on where
Well,
these are
that's
and
the
how
northern.
big they're going to be.
Well, the
and what they're going to
northern
look
is,
like.
and I've just said, what I've said again is also 7 units on the south and east. So if you can look at the plan there to the north, you've got the east boundary and the southeast boundary, south facing, and then the south and west is where the acoustic screen will be. The south and west boundary, that is.
Okay. And how many units are on that, on that south-west boundary?
There aren't any.
Where-
I thought there was 2 smaller units be floor mounted adjacent to the south facing elevation.
So where the screen is, there's no units, is that right?
Well, that acoustic screen is going around the south and west boundary. The acoustic screen around the west and south of the 2 floor mounted units to the south of the building,
How
with
far?
a timber palisade fence into the eastern boundary. So it would be around those 2 smaller units, yeah. But the east, bulk of them are east facing away from the residents.
And sorry, and so the barrier, does that go round the whole of the western side of the site? How long is the barrier?
This is around the west and southwest there. I believe that's a fence there in the top left.
Is it marked on that plan?
I think it's the northwest, that elevation northwest.
I can't read. I'm sorry, I can't read the writing from here.
No. Well, that's certainly something to take away. So. We need to do right.
I have got the right specs on and I still can't read it. So.
Yeah. But they should be looking at this anyway. But the thing
Is it possible, Miles or Sean, to provide Councillor Maelstrom with a plan that she could?
It has been done.
Okay, I still can't see where the barrier is on that. I can see existing retaining wall.
That L-shaped thing behind the 2 lower?
That says 2 aircon units to be floor mounted facing the field. Oh yeah, L-shaped 2 metre high acoustic fence panel. Okay, so that it's only there then. It's quite a small panel. Yeah, I understand now. Thank you.
Any further questions from colleagues? Yes, Councillor Boynton.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to clarify, in the office appraisal, it refers to the units being operated by a timer switch from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. The recommendation refers to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So I just want some clarification on the times, please.
If you grant as recommended, then it will have to go, it'll be 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It could fall earlier than those hours, though, should they wish it. But as long as it's not beyond those limited hours.
Right, colleagues, we've had a fair number of very pertinent technical questions here. Move into debate now. You'll see we have a recommendation to approve the planning application subject to 7 specific conditions. To start the debate, I need a recommendation, a proposal, please, either to accept the recommendation or an alternative. Councillor Lees.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy to move this recommendation with these conditions attached. As in questions, I have been involved in quite a few of these systems myself, not personally as an engineer, but had them fitted. And I will verify that they're very silent, very quiet, going to the extent that one of the most recent ones was fitted in a cinema with windows right next to it, and you cannot hear it. A domestic fridge will make more noise than what these units would be making. So I'm happy to move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Stuart. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Dobbs.
Happy to second. Reserve the right to come back in debate.
Any contributions, colleagues? Councillor Peacock.
I just wanted to say I did call this into committee because of residents' concerns about noise, but that was for the original application. I'm quite happy that the mitigations mean that it's okay by me, is what I'm saying.
Councillor Maelstrom.
I'm just worried that obviously I'm in full support of heat pumps, but I'm a bit concerned that the timing restrictions are potentially going to interfere with the efficient running of the system, and I don't think we have any information on whether that's the case, as Councillor Buttle said. And my understanding of heat pump systems is that they work better if they are constantly on than if they're switched off for parts of the time. And we just don't seem to have any information as to whether these units are going to be forced to run inefficiently by that condition.
Are you wanting to propose something, an alternative?
I wouldn't know what alternative to propose other than the lifting of any timing condition or the non-imposition of such a condition.
Would you like some advice from our officers?
That would be good.
I mean, it's within members' gift if they want to hypothetically, to move the recommendation, albeit with a variation of that or a bit greyer for that specific timing or timings to be agreed prior to installation. That will be had in collaboration with environmental health officers. Given the actual specific wording and of the actual the time frames, the parameters that have been actually put as in the actual condition, I believe they did come from or did come out of conversations and responses from the environmental health team. So they asked for those parameters to be installed on that. That's not to say that they were objecting to the application or the potential noise or lack thereof, or whispering noise coming from the actual units. It's just that they felt that was the most appropriate form of parameters to set in this instance. However, members, if they are so minded and were that so minded to approve the application, if that is the case, then we could look at either removing, varying, or to completely deleting conditions off there. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, if I can just follow up. My concern is that I don't think we have the information on which to decide whether that condition is appropriate or not. That's my worry. I don't know enough about heat pumps, and particularly this installation, on which we don't have the technical information in front of us to say what sort of condition might be appropriate. So I'm not proposing any specific.
Well, I think we understand the point you're making. You've had an offer from the officers to vary that particular or add an additional condition, which may go, I think, as far as we can to meeting your concern if you want to put it forward. But you need to put it forward as a proposal. Well, you think about it then before we come to a vote. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. I've studied this over quite a period of time, this application, and I think the officers have got this correct, and I agree with Councillor Lees that these heat pumps don't make a lot of noise. It's a fact, they don't make a lot of noise. And I think we really quibbling about really nothing, really. It's only minute noise. Probably the same as Councillor Lee says, it's something like a fridge. So it's noise, it's not. But we look at the advantages. We now see going from oil-fired now to clean, carbon-free central heating systems, which we should really grab hold to and take forward. I think we owe it to the children at school, in fact. They want to grow up in a better environment than what we've had with oil and coal and so forth. And we should grasp these benefits and take them forward, and I totally agree. And if it's not been seconded, I will second it to Councillor Lee's proposal to accept the officer recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Dobbs has seconded, actually, Peter. Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. My experience of heat pumps and some complaints I've had from residents and whatever, it's not the fact that these units are on all the time. It's that when they come on, and they have to come on during the evening, that noise is much more noticeable. And I can imagine in a village, that device coming on several times during the night will disturb people. I've actually experienced this. I've actually been to a site somewhere else and had it sort of proved to me. It's not an enormous amount of noise, but it stands out. And I can imagine in a village like that, it would be more obvious. I know we're not here to judge why they're having this system, but I've always been told that these air source heat pumps are only efficient and work correctly in very well insulated modern buildings. I've been on planning committees in another place, and it's been suggested that somebody goes away from having a turbine and goes for a system like this, but they're not that efficient. They're not efficient in old buildings. This is a listed building, probably a couple of 100 years old, so it's not going to be that efficient at all. It's probably going to be on quite a lot, actually, trying to maintain the temperatures. It's probably a single glazed building. I'm not against green technology, but I don't think this is the technology for this school. And then I've got concerns about the noise issues and whatever. I know there's a motion on the table, but considering the questions that have been asked by different people, I just wonder if we should have deferred this, get some more information, and reconsider it at a later date. Thank you.
Well, I'd say the same to you as I said to Councillor Maelstrom, Dermot. We have condition 5. If you've had an offer from officers to look at a variation to that condition, to look at the optimum efficiency in terms of the operation of the heat pumps rather than a 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. So I have to leave that with you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to note what Councillor Peacock said, that she brought this to the committee because of the original proposal, and she's not she wouldn't have brought it with a change in the proposal. Also note that if you look at the plans, all the heat pumps face into the field, even though 2 of them are on the south side of the building. So none of them face directly at the house next door, as I understand it. Now, I brought up the issue about noise and the different numbers that are put in the report, because we have to judge we're judging on the basis of the report and on what we received in other places. And I noticed that there is a sort of verbatim, it doesn't clear whether it's a verbatim or not, reporting of what the consultant said about the noise impact. And there are 3 numbers in that. One is 31, one is 36, and another is 0 in the same paragraph. Can I ask in the future that officers make sure that they understand what a paragraph like that means before coming before the committee? I'm not going to use that as a reason for voting against this, because I do believe that the noise, as Councillor Lees says, the noise impact of this is going to be very, very small. But, as I understand it from 31 dB is quiet. In terms of the condition, my proposal would be that we would delegate authority to the the development management to agree any changes to that condition, subject to advice received from a heating engineer about the efficient running of the plant and the chances of it coming on overnight. I note that it's going to come on mostly when the temperature is cold, when people are likely to have their windows closed. Not necessarily always, because people like fresh air, but if windows are closed, there would be less noise impact inside the property. So when the heating is on, windows are likely to be closed. Therefore, the condition doesn't, to me, seem to be necessary. But I think I would prefer that it was delegated to officers to revise that condition in the light of any advice they receive subsequently from a heating engineer. And I'd ask the proposer and seconder to adopt that as part of their motion.
This is in relation to condition 5. Councillor Lees, would you respond to that request?
If I can come back in now, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to accept that. Going back to the concerns raised, it'd be very difficult to predict how long these units would actually run in an old school, because unless you've got an EPC, performance certificate, environmental energy performance certificate, you wouldn't know what heat is required of the U value for the building to heat. So it would be very difficult to calculate for anybody how long these units would actually be running and what temperature they want the school children to be sat in the classrooms at. So it would be very difficult to predict how long them units would be running. Particularly in the evening, if they've got a thermostat on, they'll only come on when it gets down to 4 degrees. So if they've been on till 7 o'clock at night, it's only the outdoor unit that's going to be cold that'll click that unit into generating some heat just to stop the pipe freezing up. So it'll be very difficult to predict how long they would actually run without M&E report on it from, electrical engineers report on it on exactly how long they would run. But I would be happy to leave it to officer delegation to see, what those terms would be. Regards the noise again, these heat pumps, they're all sat on big, thick rubber feet now, so there's no noise that's generated from the vibration from them now. If you look on our recent planning applications we've had on housing estates, we've gone off gas on a lot of occasions. We're now putting heat pumps on these new properties we're building. If you look round, all these heat pumps are directly below windows. So it's impossible for them to be really noisy. Else we'd have had complaints after complaint to this council or to whoever. But I'm quite happy that these heat pumps would be silent and efficient. Thank you.
Councillor Dobbs, you seconded. Will you also be happy to accept that amendment?
I am
to condition?
indeed, Chair. And just to just come back on a few general points, just winding the whole thing back, I think it's pretty clear that the advantages, the positives, do outweigh any harm. And I think it's worth bearing in mind that this smaller fence is so that we can see a listed building and we aren't obscuring it with a modern fence. I think there's a balance. We got rid of what I think everybody would agree was a fairly unsightly oil tank. So there's a whole range of positives, leave alone the way of heating the school in a carbon-free way. So lots of positives, and I think that we need to let this simply happen and fine-tune it, which the kind of suggestions about the conditions will allow to happen. As Councillor Lees has suggested, this will need some tweaking. It's been designed. I think we're trying to redesign it here this evening, which is a little presumptuous of us. So I think, this would be a diocesan person who probably does this for lots of listed buildings, who made this recommendation. And I think we've got to trust those people and run with their suggestions. So I'm happy to go with officer recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Shelley.
Thank you. Yes, just briefly. I mean, again, I'm happy to go with officer recommendations, and I approve the principle of this. The thing that concerns me as much as anything else, and it's not really a question, it's an observation. It's the same observation that the conservation officer makes, that he says it would have been helpful in the full application if contextual drawings had been provided to show what the proposed air conditioning units look like. So we've got existing here, but this is a listed building, and yet we don't know what it's actually going to look like afterwards. So if anyone has any opportunity to go back to the applicant and say this would be extremely helpful and to bear this in mind in future cases, I think we should all learn that lesson.
Thank you, Roger. I think as Sean Robson said earlier, there is a potential listed building consent in train. If that's called in by members for consideration by committee, then the committee will re-look at that. But assuming there is a listed building consent application, that will have full dimension drawings, which will address some of the points I think have been legitimately raised this evening. Any further contribution to debate, Councillor Buttle?
I was going to encourage a delegation to re-examine the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. But I'd also like to point out I've lived next to primary schools on several different occasions in several different areas, and they are very noisy. They really are very noisy. I don't think there's any chance of the air source heat pump making much impact. Thanks very much.
Right. We have an amendment suggested to condition 5. Would you like to read out your suggested wording of that?
We can probably come up with a formal wording now, but it's something, because it's quite specific and quite open. I mean, I think
Sorry, Chair, through you, I've put the decision here as I understand it, and it's that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions as set out in the report, and that authority be delegated to the development manager to vary the hours as detailed in condition 5 following further professional advice regarding the predicted efficiency of the proposed system.
sorry, Jay, yes.
Right, thank you, Tommy. That was helpful as ever. Right, are we all clear that we have the recommendation to approve subject to an amended condition 5? All those in favour of that, please show. Those against, please show. And I think we have no abstentions, so that is carried. Thank you, colleagues. Right, next application is out at Clifton, where we have the application for 18 dwellings, 16 dwelling houses and 2 apartments north of Hawthorne House. We have a number of speakers here on this item, but colleagues, you'll also see that we have some late representations on this. On your sheet is item 5.2, clarification and correction. And you also have the email referred to there, referred to in the first paragraph. So before we have the speakers, I'm going to suggest that members have a look through the email correspondence and the officer's response to it. Allow you 3 or 4 minutes to read through that. Okay, we'll press on. We've got 6 speakers on this item. Our first speaker from Clifton and Compton Parish Council is Mr. Graham Elliott. Mr. Elliott. Sorry, you should be addressed as Councillor Elliott. I apologise for that. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I wish to object to this planning application on behalf of Clifton Parish Council. The site lies outside of the settlement boundary for Clifton and is also in a greenfield setting. A similar application was previously refused, and the current application does not justify a departure from the adopted local plan. The proposal would create an urban development within the countryside. With the removal of hedgerows to create the visibility splay, this development would be clearly visible from the public highway, resulting in harm to the landscape, and would not form an organic form of development within the existing settlement of Clifton. With the exception of the proposed footpath into Dole's Lane, the development would not have any connection with the current settlement of Clifton and would not integrate with it in any way. The development would also reduce the separation between the settlements of Ashbourne and Clifton. The review of the local plan, currently out for consultation, makes provision for only 2 additional dwellings in Clifton during the lifetime of the proposed new development plan, and therefore there is no rationale to any provision for the current proposed 18 dwellings. A further 81 dwellings have recently been approved at appeal for Ashbourne, and these, together with approximately 300 further dwellings to be provided on the former Ashbourne airfield site, would make a significant contribution towards the District Council's housing needs. The proposed development would adversely affect the setting of Clifton Village and severely impact the character and appearance of the green fields and open countryside. It does not create a sustainable form of development linked to the current Clifton settlement, and any benefit from the provision of additional housing would be outweighed by the adverse effect on the locality. There are other issues, but other residents will address those rather than me causing them to be repeated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Our next speaker is a local resident, Mr. Anthony Jones. Mr. Jones, please.
Good evening. As a resident of Doles Lane, Clifton, for over 30 years, I am objecting to this planning application on a number of important issues. Firstly, as most of you are aware, the A515 Clifton Road is one of the most dangerous roads in Derbyshire. Most recently, we have noticed a considerable increase in vehicles travelling along this road. In May, a resident survey logged 1,055 vehicles passing this location over a 1 hour period, of which 134 were HGVs. 2 fatal accidents have occurred in the past 6 years, along with numerous unrecorded incidents. The proposed application will feature a revised vehicle exit onto this dangerous highway. The new position moves it closer to the sweeping bend to the north as one leaves Ashbourne, and just at the point where the speed limit increases to 50 miles per hour and vehicles start to accelerate. Any vehicles turning right into the planned site will run a considerable risk of tail-end collision. Furthermore, 5 other vehicle exits already exist within a 200-yard distance of the proposed site, increasing further the perilous nature of this stretch of road. I am not alone in my opinion. The overwhelming majority of the 100 or so Clifton residents who have written to object identified highway safety as a critical concern. The situation is no better for pedestrians. The footpath alongside the highway is unlit, frequently flooded, and hedging and undergrowth forces pedestrian outwards towards the high-speed traffic, making it an unpleasant walk at best and a perilous one at worst. Since Clifton Primary School is fully allocated, most families with school children will be walking along the A515 towards Ashbourne. Despite claims by the applicant, there is no bus serving Clifton, and anyone wishing to go shopping without a car must walk to Ashbourne on the same dangerous footpath, maybe with small children in tow, as there are no shops in Clifton. Effectively, therefore, the development is unsustainable because a car is essential for anyone living there. My second objection refers to the site layout and the applicant's claim that the development is neither out of place nor overbearing. Since my property will back onto plot 13, it means I will be confronted with a brick garage across 50% of my garden perimeter and within feet of it, and the remainder obliterated by plot 13 gable end towering well over 9 metres above my dwelling, which already lies 1 metre below the proposed site level. I consider the applicant's claim completely inaccurate and totally unacceptable. Thank you for listening to my objections, and I respectfully ask you to take these important matters into consideration and refuse this planning application.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Next we have Mr. John Griffiths, also a local resident, to speak against the application. And you also have 3 minutes, Mr. Griffiths.
A long-term resident of Doles Lane, Clifton, which is immediately adjacent to the proposed development. And this is the second time that I've appeared before you to object to the building of houses on this field. I'll try not to duplicate what's already been said by the parish council and by one of my neighbours, but I'd like to summarise the views of all of the residents of Doles Lane, the Greenacre, which is opposite Doles Lane, and the vast majority of Clifton villagers, of which about 100 sent in written objections. 1. The site is outside the village plan agreed with the District Council, and if approved, could eventually lead to Clifton simply becoming nothing more than a suburb of Ashbourne. There are 3 other fields between this application and Ashbourne, and if this is approved, then why would you not approve the others, and simply Clifton then would become a suburb of the town. 2, the proposed access, as Tony Jones has just said, is onto the busy A515 trunk road, which is the main route to both the M6 and the M1. And as the population of the town grows, which it is doing, it gets busier by the day. It's already extremely dangerous, and this latest access being closer to the bend to the north of the site is even more dangerous and would only make things worse. This was in fact confirmed by members of this committee who visited the site after the first application, which was earlier in the year. But at that time you felt unable, understandably, to overrule the Highways Authority view that the site access was acceptable. But I heard a number of comments at this meeting in December which said we don't believe that this is not a dangerous access, but you couldn't override the Highways Authority, which I understand. 3, although the protected trees in the field will not now be removed, their roots are almost certain to be damaged by drainage ditches, etc., and some of them will need to be regularly pruned, or they'll represent a further highway safety issue. Who's going to do that? The wildlife which exists on the site at the moment must be adversely affected. How could it be otherwise? 4, and you'll hear a little more about this from another neighbour in a second, there are existing issues with sewage and wastewater drainage in the village, and we have considerable concerns about adequate drainage both on the site and the ability of the existing sewage network to cope. I've not seen any comments from Severn Trent on this, but you'll hear a bit more at first hand about the problems that already exist in Clifton. Protestations by the applicant to the contrary and statements that the site will improve biodiversity and that the area needs more housing is no more than a smokescreen. This is purely and simply about making a significant amount of money on a totally unsuitable site. It's the opportunistic purchase of a family house and what is not much more than a large paddock with the sole object of building houses which are neither wanted nor needed to make money. The district as a whole may be falling short of its housing targets.
You're run out of time.
Sorry, totally. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffiths. Thank you for that. Next, we have Mr. Ron Taylor, a local resident, to speak against.
Good evening.
And you have 3 minutes, Mr. Taylor, please.
Thank you. Good evening, committee. I'm a Clifton resident, and I've lived in my bungalow for 26 years, which is only a few yards from the Severn Trent pumping station on Cross Side at Clifton. On several occasions in the last few years, I have experienced several occurrences at times when it was raining heavily that water was backing up into my toilet and bath in my bathroom. The first time it happened was in the middle of the night, and it was quite a frightening experience that water shoots up several inches under pressure and makes a lot of noise. The last time it happened was on the 2nd of January this year, and this time it lasted for 2 or 3 hours, and on this occasion there were signs of sewage in the water. I reported the matter to Severn Trent Water, as I had done on previous occasions, and after 2 days, 2 operatives came from Severn Trent, attended first, they attended, and first they checked that there were no blockages in my drainage and sewage pipes. They were all clear. I asked what the solution to my problem was, and I got a shrug of shoulders from the operatives. They said if the pipes on my property were enlarged, the pumping station would not cope with the increased flow. And if the pump at the station was made more powerful, it would cause problems further down the line. So it is obvious to me that the present sewage and drainage system cannot cope at times of heavy rain, which are becoming more and more frequent, and there is no way it will cope with the addition of a further 18 properties. And for these reasons, I totally oppose this planning application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor. Next speaker is Miss Lydia Clare, local resident who's going to speak in favour of the application. You have 3 minutes, Lydia.
Good evening. I'm here to encourage support for the application. We have carefully considered the feedback from both the committee and members of the public following the previous application. In response, we've revised our proposal to address all concerns, ensuring it meets the community's expectations. This updated application retains the existing trees, including social housing, provides a safe connection to the village and offers a diverse range of property sizes and prices to cater for different needs and budgets. Our proposal has been carefully designed to be in keeping with the character of the village. We understand the importance of maintaining the local aesthetic and preserving the village's unique charm. I would like to highlight that the tangible benefits this development will bring to the village. The plan includes affordable housing, will provide opportunities for local people, young families and those on a lower income to remain in the village, strengthening the sense of community. Contributions to the local schools and infrastructure. These contributions will directly support the village's growing needs and ensuring the local services are not overwhelmed by the new development. We are committed to improving accessibility, and our proposal includes a new footpath that will safely connect the development with the village, encouraging walking and reducing traffic impact. The development will offer a range of house sizes and prices catering to a variety of budgets. This ensures that the housing will be accessible to a wide spectrum of residents, from first-time buyers to larger families, helping to foster a balanced, sustainable community. We believe that the development will support the village's long-term sustainability by creating a mix of housing that caters to different needs, providing much-needed social houses and improving local infrastructure. We are contributing positively to the future of the village, and I'm confident the development will enhance our community for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That was very clear and concise. Our last speaker, Mr. David Breakwell, who is the agent for the applicant. David, you have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair. As the committee will know, this is a resubmission of an application for housing on this site. The last application having been refused last December. Excuse me. It was refused on 4 grounds, and we've spent this year seeking to address all of the concerns raised. And from reading your office's report, we've been successful by addressing 3 of those 4 concerns. All concerns regarding trees, highways and biodiversity have now been resolved. No amenity issues have been raised, and the report you have from your officers accepts all standards have been met. The applicant is willing to pay all financial contributions requested, and this has been confirmed in an email. Housing density has been increased following the last committee meeting, and the housing mix amended to provide a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bed units. The officer's report and recommendation focuses on the proposal's impact on the site character and appearance. The previous application was criticised for being unimaginative in that it proposed large houses around a cul-de-sac and lacking an appropriate mix of house sizes and designs. We put a significant effort into addressing this concern. We feel that the layout is much better thought out, more organic and less formal as the road meanders through the site. The dwellings have been positioned so that they are irregularly placed and make the most of the changing site levels. The criticism of a cul-de-sac access is retained in the officer's report. However, I do feel that this is harsh. The limitations of the site's shape and size will inevitably result in a single road going into it, and it will end somewhere in the site, giving a cul-de-sac approach, whatever the pattern of development proposed. Lastly, the site is clearly outside of the village boundary, but it does lie alongside the boundary, and the council's own policies therefore lend support to it, especially given the absence of a 5-year housing supply. I'm aware that planning committees get exasperated by the continued reference to the lack of a 5-year supply of housing land, but there is clearly a deficit of housing locally and nationwide, and this policy is there to resolve that need. Granting planning permission to this proposal will help the council reach that 5-year supply target. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Rakewell. That was again clear and concise. Right, we now invite our officers to present the application. I think, Miles, this is one of yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is an application for the erection of 16 dwellings and 2 flats at Land North of Hawthorne House, Clifton Road, Clifton. You see the site here, it's abutting the boundary of Clifton on the west side of the A515. The site area is approximately 0.9 hectares. It's close to the junction with Doles Lane. The site is greenfield in nature and belongs under the ownership of Hawthorne House, which lies to the south. Residential development lies to the southwest with open countryside to the north and west. The land falls away gradually in the east to west direction. The site lies outside the settlement of Clifton, but it immediately abuts it to the south, as already said. Full plan permission, as stated, was for 18 units. This comprises of 2 one-bed apartments, 4 or 2 pairs of 2-bed semi-detached houses, 6 or 3 pairs of 3-bed semi-detached dwellings, 2 detached dwellings, 3-bed detached dwellings, and 4 4-bed detached dwellings. A section of the existing hedgerow frontage will need to be removed and replanted further back within the site to provide the necessary visibility sightlines, and the existing walled forecourt to Hawthorne House will also need to be reduced in depth and reconstructed. We look in, here's the site layout, and you see there's a sinuous access road internally with the site, with the housing arranged around it. You can see the northern, and this is slightly tilted to the west. So, just by way of background, 2301-102 was a planned application for 9 dwellings on site, and this was refused, as was been already stated, last year on the 12th of December. There are 4 reasons. The first one is encroachment in the open countryside. Second one was development not making full and effective use of the site to develop requisite open space, affordable housing and developer contributions. There was a removal of the 2 Norway maple trees, and they were protected by tree preservation orders, and there was insufficient information with regard to biodiversity net gain. This application, we're looking at the principle of development. We'll go into elevations soon. It is accepted. It is a Tier 3 settlement, the same as before, subject to all other material planning considerations being met. It's promoting housing development where there's access to a broad range of jobs, services and facilities. In Clifton itself, there's, if I can just check this, I beg your pardon. It's a small rural village. There is a public house, a village hall, a parish church, many opportunities for walking, biking, other attractions and activities are close by. There is a dial-up bus service, I understand, which provides connections to neighbouring towns and villages. Ashbourne is approximately 1.25 miles away to the northeast the application site. Ashbourne itself, of course, being served by public transport links. The applicant does propose 13 market houses, of which 2 are 2-bed, 4 are 4-bed and 7 are 3-bed. In terms of the need, there's an undersupply, we feel, a 2-bed, an oversupply of 4-bed. Now, this in itself would be, therefore, a departure from policy HC 11, but in itself, it wouldn't be sufficient to warrant a refusal. It's not practical, I think, to deliver a small number of allotments to the site, but there's certain ways, practical ways of providing for the above in terms of a developer contribution. We'll get to the contributions in a while, because there are other contributions which will be sought. These need to be necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. They need to be directly related to the development, fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development as well. A major scheme, what's been sought by the county for primary education is just under £61,000. An open space contribution of £6,755. There'll be a small monetary fee attached to any legal agreement. Also, there's a affordable housing contribution above the 5 units provided of just under 18,000. In total, there's £85,618.83 of developer contributions sought. Now, I think in terms of how we appraise this, we do consider, in terms of the character and appearance of the area, that this development isn't organic. We don't agree with the applicant. It is larger than the previous scheme. You know, it does have much more housing, 18 units, but they're mostly larger dwelling houses, 3 or more bedrooms. 12 of the 18 are 3 or more bedrooms. Exception of the footpath to Dole's Lane, it is detached from the village. There is an access from the south, but this isn't sought to be utilised vehically, and you know, we do feel therefore it really is a replication of the detached residential development to which it's proposed to abut, but it doesn't integrate into it. Contrary to what some of the complainants feel, we feel that the amenity, looking at the outline there is sufficient distance from the proposed housing and the existing housing for it not to have an adverse impact in terms of loss of outlook, in terms of overlooking loss of privacy. These are the housing types. As you go on, you see there's handed housing, semi-detached here, 2 and 3 bed, and then the detached larger housing, the 4 bed there, and more detached housing. This is what be the footpath, the connection to Dole's Lane, looking north. This is from the A515, looking west. That's again looking towards Dole's Lane. This is along the A515 looking north. This is from the A515 looking west towards the southeast of the site. And this is again from Dole's Lane looking northwest towards the northwest boundary of the site. And this is existing development in Clifton. There's another one looking north to the site. So that gives you some feel of the sites. We don't think there's any adverse amenity concerns in terms of impact on residents, existing residents. We think the living conditions are going to be sufficient. They're going to be satisfactory given the amount of garden space, and you know, with the developer contributions, that will mitigate any potential harm there. In terms of impact on hedgerows and trees, further information was sought. The tree officer asked for an up-to-date arboricultural impact assessment, and this was considered to be acceptable, so the tree officer's objections were withdrawn. One of the reasons for refusal of the previous scheme has been overcome, so subject to a suitably worded condition, that is in accordance with policy PD6 of the local plan. Another main concern was biodiversity and wildlife, and biodiversity net gain. Now, an ecological appraisal and bat survey report been submitted. The Derbyshire Wildlife Trust found this acceptable. They did notice a loss of 0.58 habitat units. They require 0.82 habitat units to be delivered for the 10% gain required under the Environment Act. Now, the statement has been submitted from environmental trading platforms. They have identified land within Derbyshire Dales Local Planning Authority available to offset the required units. Now, this would be something which would have to be done, could be through a worded condition, through a legal agreement, but it can be done. The Derbyshire Wildlife Trust have removed their objection. So that has also been overcome. In terms of purely ecological matters, further conditions have been requested relating to protected species, related to the Derbyshire Swift Conservation Society's requirement for swift boxes. The applicant has considered that he's agreed to provide these. So all kind of ecological matters have been overcome. Highway matters, once again, have not attracted a objection from the local highway authority. In terms of car parking provision on site, there is sufficient car parking being provided. We understand it is perhaps the key third-party concern, but there are no highway objections. They have, however, asked for several conditions. Now, should members not agree with officers, then these conditions can be attached to any resolution to grant planning permission. Flood risk and drainage, it is flood zone 1. I don't think there is any great difference here in terms of with the previous scheme. There was no objection from the LLFA to that. We can't therefore reasonably object in these terms either. And I would just say that in terms of climate change mitigation, it is proposed to install EV charging points for each dwelling. The energy efficient building fabric and installation is to be submitted and can be conditioned. The high efficiency double glazed windows, efficient building services, low energy lighting, water usage, all of this can be conditioned should you arrive at a different conclusion. But ultimately, overwhelmingly, the balance for us, or rather on balance, the tilted balance is that the proposal is encroaching in the open countryside location. We feel it is harmful to the local landscape's intrinsic character and distinctiveness, and will significantly and demonstratively outweigh the benefits of housing provision. That is the tilted balance that needs to be applied. We do therefore feel that the proposal therefore would not constitute a sustainable form of development, contrary to policies S4, PD1 and PD5 of the local plan and the national planning policy framework. So ultimately, applying that tilted balance, we still recommend for that sole reason that planning permission should be refused. And thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Miles. There's questions from members now. Councillor Hughes, I think you were first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for that excellent summary of the planning application and your argument in favour of the recommendation. And I would say that I think I'm fully in agreement with what you say. But there are two objections that members of the public have brought to this committee. And while I think I understand the reasons why we can't really consider those objections, can I ask two questions, one on each of those objections, just to get a confirmation? So in terms of the drainage and the sewer and access to the sewer, as I understand it, if Severn Trent Water is willing to provide access to this, does not object, then there's no material planning consideration for us to take into account. That's my first question. So what happens with in that case is that Severn Trent should provide additional capacity. If it doesn't provide that capacity, then that's another matter, but it's not a matter for this planning committee. The second question is about the objection about access to the main road. And again, as I understand it, if we did object on those grounds, then there would be a risk to the decision that we come to, in that we couldn't sustain that subsequently. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is an area which is flood risk zone 1, which is the lowest risk. Also, in terms of drainage, it would fall largely outside of the planning system. It would be in terms of drainage, in terms of capacity, in terms of if there was an absence of an objection, if it could be managed, then that would form part of not only should the recommendation be different, it would be conditioned, it would be part of a legal agreement or a Section 104 agreement. So, no, you couldn't reasonably object. And I think the same for the highways. Yes, a lot of concerns. Highways initially did have concerns subject to additional information that was provided. Now, subject to 4 or 5 on top of my head conditions, that's now fallen away to mitigate those impacts. So if that's the case, we can't put that down as a reason for objection reasonably. No. Thank you.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Has there been any discussion at all with Derbyshire County Council Highways about restricted speeds on this very, very dangerous road? But without it, it's a non-starter, isn't it, really?
Well, I mean, that's for the Highway Authority to comment on. I mean, in the round, and they've asked for the additional information they required. That was given, and they responded, withdrawing their objection subject to conditions. So that we have to go with that. They are the Highway Authority, not us.
But it's reasonable to have discussions, isn't it, before a planning application
It's reasonable, but ultimately, we send away to them. They look at the plans, they look at the information. They did ask for more information, significant amount, which was provided by the applicant, and then they responded to that additional information, withdrawing their objections subject to conditions.
Yeah, that's one of my questions. I'll come back to later on that one. Also, you spoke about flooding zones. Environment Agency have put it in 0-1, haven't they? 1 scout classification. There's no really flooding issue here, is there? Would you say, really?
There have been some concerns of surface water flooding at times.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's a flood risk, and that's how they will zone the land in terms of flood risk.
Yeah. And the third question is, you mentioned about swift boxes. I think it's one of our policies now where we have to put swift bricks in every new property. That's a policy of the council now, isn't it? It should be, because we decided by diversity.
When they come back, and increasingly, as you know, planning constantly evolves. What our statutory consultees ask for by way of condition constantly evolves as well. Swift boxes are now becoming part of this, as are integrated bird boxes in general.
Yeah, well, swift bricks were brought in last year, and it should be a part of planning policy.
If it was a different outcome to the recommendation. And then that could be something that's a condition.
Yeah.
And it has been accepted by the applicant, to be fair.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, going back to Councillor Hughes's earlier conversation in the last application, which again with Derbyshire County Council and the local flood authority, being the lead flood authority, no response to date. Makes it very difficult for us to make these decisions because, yes, it's not a planning material issue, but every time it comes back to this committee that there's no response from these agencies.
Stuart, you must ask a question.
The question is, why haven't Derbyshire County Council replied to date? They've had the period of time. Why haven't we got a reply?
Through you, Chair, if I could. I think it's appropriate to say that we do our level best as officers to ask the question, to repeatedly ask the question. Whilst not part of this committee this evening, I do have an application myself for a large one in Ashbourne. It was mentioned, the airfield application. And I do have numerous emails asking for just for an update. Unfortunately, that hasn't been forthcoming. We can ask the question. We can't compel them to come back within a specific time. All we can do is ask the question, I'm afraid. But I can't answer the question in terms of what you've asked, why they haven't come back, though. Thank you, Chair.
So that's an honest answer, Stuart. We don't seem to be able to get an answer to your question.
It's a bit like temporary. What's temporary, isn't it? Thank you, Chair.
I couldn't comment on that. Councillor Bonsall.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. There were a few things that caught my ear when you were presenting, Miles. One was the balance of housing wasn't sufficient to cause, to warrant a refusal. This was on the affordable and +4s and 3s and what have you, and the actual balance of the sizes of the house. Do we actually have like a written down statement as to where or not what is acceptable, what's almost acceptable, and what's kind of no chance whatsoever?
Well, the housing land, we do have housing land statements.
Yeah,
we do provide, and I was looking at the market component of the housing there, and there was what I've said, another provision of 2-bed, over provision of 4-bed. My feeling, this is a matter of judgment, and in the round, standing alone, if that was the only objection, it wouldn't be sufficient to refuse.
Yeah, okay, so I'm just checking that you take local housing need into account when you make that choice. Right,
Yes.
right. That was the first one. Do we have a hierarchy of biodiversity net gain where something that's net gain is provided on site is like a bigger tick than provided off site?
Yeah, okay, that's okay. Yes, it would usually on site would be the best option. If it couldn't be, it would be adjoining the site, then within the locality, then within the local authority, and then beyond the local authority. So you would look at it, the closer it is, on site's the best thing. There will be times when that's not possible, and it'd have to be off site.
Great. And my final one was I noticed that the plans have got an underground sud storage scheme and a pump station. I'm wondering whether or not they were intending on splitting their sewerage from their surface water. Is that what that was about?
Well, things like SUDs would be, in a planning permission for a major scheme, would be part of a Section 106 agreement, the management, the monitoring. In terms of foul and flood, surface water drainage would be subject to planning conditions. So it would be subject to conditions for further information if we were looking to resolve to grant permission, contrary to the recommendation.
So do we know what the pump station was intended to do?
No, we do not.
Thank you.
Councillor Shelley.
Thank you. Yeah, very good report again. Although I do have a concern, which I'm just seeking a bit of clarification on, really, given that we live in changing times and we've just been on the receipt of a rather nasty overturning at appeal of a housing development in Darley Dale, which is also on the edge of a built-up area. Am I right in thinking that our defence of the officer recommendation rests solely on paragraph 7.53, which is about the harm of development in terms of the setting of the neighbouring settlement and the impact and character appearance on the open countryside? If it does, then I respect your professional judgment on the recommendation, but I do wonder if we are setting ourselves up for a difficult application to contest on appeal. And this is not to undermine everything that's been contributed by the residents tonight. I do accept that there are factors there which aren't necessarily reflected in the report because they're local knowledge, which is very important.
Yeah, I think it's a case where, it has been looking at the previous scheme, looking at how objections, most of those objections have fallen away, looking at the fact that policy S4 and the fact we don't have a 5-year land supply does give, some support to edge of settlement, on the edge of settlement developments like this, proposals like this. And the balance is slightly different in the sense it's a tilted balance. It's not a strict balance of if it's outweighs it towards refusal, we refuse. It's actually substantially and demonstratively outweighs. So it's further down the line. We still think it is. Obviously, this is a matter of judgment. We just need to consider, should an appeal arrive, if it does go to appeal, we just need to consider very carefully the policy angle, because there also is the housing need aspect. And you hear from the plan review, all right, it's just a review at the moment, there's a limited scope for further housing, and is it in fact the other thing, does it make full use of the site? I mean, there is an argument there. So all of this will be something which questions I'm sure will come up should a decision be made, which is consistent with what we're saying here.
Thank you, Roger. I think, Roger, you've also heard reference to the way the proposed development integrates or doesn't with the existing urban fabric. I think that's also a relevant consideration here. Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. I want to just pick up on paragraph 7.47. So here we are. We don't have a response to the flood risk assessment from the LLFA, but we are saying, and I quote, to this end, the requirement for appropriate drainage could be secured by planning condition if permission were granted. So we're writing, this local planning authority, are writing that or not, if that's a question.
In this instance, it was something where the LFA did reply to the previous scheme, and I think we could draw some strength from that. I think what the long and short of it is this, that we can't object in these terms, even in the absence of the flood authority's response. There's a low flood risk, and drainage, as an answer to a further question, was that you could be conditioned, it could be part of a legal agreement in terms of sustainable drainage. You know, there are these various things that can be done should planning permission be granted. You know, we're in a difficult position if we get no response, despite the fact that we received this 6 months ago, I think, more or less, and it's been put off for those additional informations, and the local county have not come back to us. I'll draw my confidence from the previous scheme and what the response was for that, because although that was for 9 units, this is for 18. It's not a great leap.
Councillor Peacock.
I think I was just going to ask, given the time and given the fact that the officer recommendation is to refuse, I think we should probably not spend any more time debating these issues. So I would like to move the officer recommendation, please. Is that okay?
Allow time for questions, Lucy, I'm afraid, unless you want to. I take the point. Does anyone have any more questions? If not, we will move into a debate. I take that as no. So we move into debate. Would someone like to move a recommendation? The recommendation you've seen before us is to refuse the application.
If Councillor Peacock will move refusal, I'd like to second that, please.
Okay, yeah, in moving it, I would like to say that I am not against building on this field in principle. We need housing, but I do agree that the balance of the housing and the location, we need to have that balance. And if this proposal had more smaller houses on it, the ones we need, I possibly would be inclined to agree to it. I want to say that but given that it is what it is, I'm going to move to refuse, please.
Do we have a seconder, Councillor Burton?
On seconding the motion, I want to thank the various people that brought their representations tonight. I think the people from Clifton who are opposing the application very well put the reasons why on the site visit. I myself was very uncomfortable. I mean, the phrase was used tonight, unique charm, wasn't it? How is this going to enhance the unique charm of that beautiful last wedge that was rightly being asserted before it becomes part of Ashbourne? And there are, I believe, within the case officer's report, legitimate planning reasons, not my point of view that I like to see green fields, but that there are good specific reasons why this particular application should be not supported. I am somewhat perplexed that we had an application. Why wasn't that first application then as good as this second one? You know, So I'm not very confident with the applicant.
It's been proposed and seconded. Next contribution from Councillor Buttle, please.
Thanks very much. I'm kind of fully in support of Miles on this one, that it is development in the open countryside. And I'm a bit dubious about Lucy's reasoning about if we had smaller houses there, because then we'd have younger families, and then the site would become more unsustainable because you'd have people busing their children to school and what have you. So that it kind of looks like a non-starter as a site to me, but I'm going to support this anyway. And thank you, Miles. I enjoyed that one.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. This is all right. The field is quite, same as Councillor Peacock said, it's quite acceptable, the field to build on, in my opinion. But it's a non-starter because of the highway situation. I mean, this road is terribly, terribly dangerous. There's vehicles coming down there probably over 70 miles an hour. Great XGVs passing it yesterday. It's a bit disconcerting when these big wagons and you have a small footpath to walk down. It's very, very dangerous. And without the highways coming in and say they'd alter the speed limit, it's a non-starter. Because you couldn't access it or at all at like speeds coming down that road. The big wagons are really motoring, so you can't do it without that. I take on board that it would be an ideal site for smaller dwellings. I dispute with Councillor Buttle, but families need houses. They need houses. We're terribly, terribly short of houses, especially for young families. And we need to address this situation. It would have been an ideal site, but the infrastructure and the highways, it's a non-starter. So I agree with the mover and seconder, Chair.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I note that that Miles was not referring to the distribution of housing size in his recommendation, and I think that we need to take that into. The recommendation concerns building in the countryside, and that is what we are judging this application on. Nothing to do with the access to the site, as far as I understand it, and we are judging it basically on the report that's been produced, and we're moving officers' recommendations as such, and that's all we're doing. Isn't that correct, Chair?
That is totally correct, yes. We're trying not to muddy the waters with other issues. Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. I just echo that and to refer you to the bottom left picture where you have the site field with the hedges cut. It would be a significant new entry to Clifton. It would make a difference to the landscape, and you would have to cut the hedges to get the relevant visibility display. And I just refer you to the final sentence of 7.50. I think there are circa 450 houses in the Ash within 5 miles of this site with either outline or full planning permission in Ashbourne. I don't think we're desperately short of these 18. Thank you, Chair.
So, Lees.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dobbs has just said the exact words I was going to say, and I think we need to maintain that green belt between Ashbourne and Clifton. It's, it's a separate little village, and it should be kept that way. So, thank you.
Any further contributions? No, we're going to move to the vote. Could I ask, Miles, could you just read the reason for refusal? So I think, so we can all be absolutely clear as to why this is being recommended for refusal.
Yes. The proposed development is encroaching in the open countryside location and harmful to the local landscape's intrinsic character and distinctiveness, and would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of housing provision. The proposal, therefore, would not constitute a sustainable form of development and is contrary to policies S4, PD1 and PD5 of the adopted Derbyshire Dales local plan and the National Planning Policy Framework.
Right, we've got a proposal moved and seconded to refuse the application in line with officers' recommendations. All those in favour of that proposal, please show. Those against? And those abstaining. So that motion is carried and the application is refused. Right, we managed to get through 2 applications in an hour and 50 minutes, so we're going to have a short comfort break of 8 to 10 minutes. If we could be back by 8 o'clock, please.
That was me thinking this was going to be a reasonably swift meeting.
Right, we'll reconvene the meeting and move on to the application relating to a proposal for 8 external storage units on Dimple Road, the Dimple Mill Complex in Matlock. And we have 3 speakers for this particular application. Our first speaker is Ms. Helen Stocks, who's a local resident who's going to speak against the application. And Helen, you have 3 minutes then, please.
Thank you. I'm here representing Mr. and Mrs. Martin, who live at 1 Allen Hill, adjacent to the proposed development, and are absent due to current cancer chemotherapy treatment. The following points are to be considered by the committee. Devaluation of the property. We have been told by an estate agent that the property will be devalued by between 10% to 20% of the market price, depending on the new development's character, appearance and setting. Also, as it is to be sited within 25 metres of our property. Impact on the residential amenity. Even though the revised drawings show a compromise to the distance from the property, the height and dominance of the units, 9 metres or more above the boundary fence, there will be considerable overshadowing and loss of light to the west side of the property and garden. Appearance. With respect to whether the design is of a high quality, the appearance is still of a large development of grey metal profile sheeting to the roof and walls, with roller shutter doors. Why has there been no consideration given to building the development in stone blockwork to match the existing building? We're also concerned about the noise which will ensue with heavy rain on the metal roof and the roller shutters going up and down. Setting. We note your paragraph 7.9 response regarding the impact of the development on the surrounding area. To be considered that the development would possibly enhance the natural and historic environment is a joke. This is nothing in the surrounding area which resembles this kind of infrastructure. Whether it be of a metal or traditional construction, it would not enhance the space. We are concerned that no one from the planning board has been out to the site, otherwise they would have seen that the space would not be enhanced. Can you confirm that someone has been to the site from the planning board and surveyed the impact of the development? Times of use. It is noted that one of the conditions is that the development will be used weekdays, Monday to Friday, 8 till 6 p.m, including Saturdays, but will not be used on Sundays or bank holidays. How is this going to be managed? We hope that these comments are fully considered by the Planning Committee. We object to this application. Chris and Susan Martin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very clear and concise. Thank you again. Next speaker, Mr. David Craig, local resident, speaking against the application.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee at this late hour. I'll try and be brief. So, again, it is a point against the recommendation to grant approval in the current form. And in particular, I think as a metal fabricated building of 8 storage units, it's out of keeping in character with other buildings adjacent to and within a reasonable distance of the site. I'm certainly not against economic development and understand part of the rationale of the committee is to consider the economic impact, the positive economic impact of more activity. I think here the issue is that this metal fabrication does not integrate fully with the setting in which it finds itself. The existing commercial area around the sort of stone-built Dimple Mill is very much, is in keeping, I think, with the local area. But adding 8, in effect, sort of metal storage units with roller doors, it is not proposed a plan that uses natural materials. It doesn't sort of enhance the character of the area and fit into the wider sort of local planning. In particular, I think the the potential shadowing and noise that has been mentioned in the previous submission is it does impact on amenity, and I think that you know, the idea that this could add to a sort of high quality environment in the local area is not quite correct. I think it has a negative impact because of the proposed metal construction, and therefore, as currently proposed, this addition does not sort of meet the local standards that I think are appropriate and have been set out in this submission and will be set out further in the following one. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Very helpful. And excuse me, our third speaker, Mr. William Birmingham. Again, a local resident speaking against the application.
Hi, good evening. We've heard a lot about this evening, oddly enough, in respect of one of the other applications, about how something integrates into the existing fabric or the existing fabric of the area or the existing urban fabric. We need to visualise what we're talking about here. This is a very large metal structure, the equivalent size of several houses, 2.2 metres high at its lowest, ranging up to 3.7 metres and about 23 metres long. It is an enormous structure made out of metal with massive roller doors. It is a completely unique building. Nothing in Matlock is like it. There's nothing within about a 5-mile radius that even resembles it until you get up to the industrial estate at Tansley. What you're doing is overbearing a residential cul-de-sac, a very quiet residential cul-de-sac, inhabited by a large number of retired people, people who will be disturbed by noise during the day. What you're talking about is effectively putting an industrial-style lockup into a residential area. But it opens up a really interesting precedent in Matlock itself. Once we've established the precedent that temporary metal buildings with roller shutter doors can go on spaces in Matlock, what's wrong? Why not put one in the car park between the cinema and First Parade, or in that car park, or in any of the other spaces in Matlock? Once that precedent is established, that it's okay to build buildings that are completely out of character with what exists already. Once you've established that precedent, you're stuck with it. And that will be the position going forward. So when we start to look at the recommendation in the planning officer's report, she talks about PD1 requiring a high quality design that respects the character, identity and context of the Derbyshire Dales townscapes. Where are the metal buildings in Matlock? Where are the temporary metal buildings in Matlock? Someone asked earlier, what is temporary? PD5, we're against development that will harm or be detrimental to the character of the local or wider landscape. Chris Martin at number 1 is going to lose up to 20% of the value of his house because it is detrimental to number 1, which sits proudly at the top of Allen Hill with commanding views. It is detrimental to Allen Hill. It is detrimental to Matlock. The reality of it is that the planning officer had these concerns in mind when she suggested, you see this in 7.13, she suggested amendments to the exterior materials, but these were not forthcoming from the applicant. Why did she suggest amendments to the exterior materials? The answer is because this is a completely unique thing. We will create effectively a line of metal lockups in Matlock for the first time, and you will create a precedent that then afflicts the town going forward. That's where we're at with it. The unique charm of Allen Hill, a quiet residential cul-de-sac, it will look like one of the industrial estates on the outskirts of Chesterfield. That's what it'll look like. And back to the point on economic development, if they were talking about buildings that were sympathetic, made of stone, looked like the existing, that would be very different. But this is tin boxes which are temporary and look at and don't even abut the wall, so there's spaces for vermin. I'm sorry, I've probably talked beyond 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Birmingham. Right, Sean, are you introducing this? Perhaps, Sean, you can clarify the precise dimensions of the structure.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and through you. If I can draw members' attention to paragraph 2.2 on page 52 of the agenda, The case officer has outlined there the actual overall building has a ridge height, which is the highest point, which I'll come to the drawings, the plans in a moment, of 2.77 metres in height. That's at the highest point, with a slightly lower point of 2.33 metres. And it's approximately 23 metres in length in terms of the building. I'll come to the presentation in a moment, but before, if I may, Chair, before I go into the presentation afresh, as it were, there's just to draw members' attention to the last 2 pages of the late pages. There's a revision, proposed revision, to condition number 6, where members minded to support the officer report. And that's to the wording of condition number 6. I mean, I won't read it back verbatim, but effectively it just tweaks the actual condition as it's read at the moment and how it's being circulated in the agenda pages. So the application itself is for the erection of 8 external storage units within the commercial presence of the existing Dimple Road site. This is the application site. The plan that's in front of members now is just a more detailed view of the actual site itself. This plan illustrates the actual units themselves. As you look towards the frontage of the site, that's where the units are going to go. This is, forgive me, the rectangular presence to the lower part of the actual site, to the southern boundary. This is just the elevations and plan view of the unit itself. As you can see, to the second plan down on the right-hand side, as I'm looking at it, the drawing, the building itself has a monopitch construction in the fact that it's higher at the front, that's the 2.77 metres, and the slightly lower element at the rear, which is the site that actually, the edge that adjoins, the elevation that adjoins the actual boundary wall of the site. So these are some photographs of the existing site and existing unit. So this is looking from not exactly the position, but near enough in the position of the frontage of the actual units themselves, albeit a little bit closer to the main building. This is just showing the part of the actual parking area as it exists at the present moment in time. And again, this is a little bit more of the parking area in depth. The elevations, excuse me, it will show on the plan there that there is some token planting along the actual boundary between this site and one of the objector's properties that the lady read out the objection on behalf of the objector. So there is a little bit of planting along there, albeit it's only token planting. If I can just clarify a couple of the points that were made, clarified the actual measurements, and just for the avoidance of doubt, the case officer did visit the site, or has visited the site, hence the actual photographs as part of the presentation. And one thing that has been mentioned, just for avoidance of doubt, is precedent. I mean, it is something that is, with a number of applications, not just solely this application, but it is mentioned in planning circles that precedent in itself, it's each application, its own individual merits. Just because something's been approved in one location or locality doesn't necessarily mean it will be approved elsewhere or other sites or even adjacent sites. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. Open to questions now from members. Do we have any questions? Councillor Dobbs.
The vegetation in front of the van on the bottom right, who owns that strip of land and is responsible for the vegetation? The hedge, the embryonic hedge as it exists at the moment.
Sorry, through you, Chair. It's my understanding it's the applicant's ownership.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bonsall.
I note the biodiversity net gain is basically not very much. The roofs here, I think, look like they're about 7 or 8 degrees. They're quite flat. I think that would actually be okay for a green roof. So we could actually ask for a biodiversity net gain by asking for green roofs on these buildings, and they would also reduce noise, and it would also increase the amenity of the local area. Just an option, and whether or not we could ask for that, I'd like to know.
I mean, this is something we could condition. I mean, were members to go in line with the suggested recommendation, and if members were so minded, that is a condition that we could impose as officers, or as this committee, sorry.
Thank you.
Any further questions? No, we'll move into a debate. You see, we have a recommendation from officers to approve the application subject to a number of standard conditions. Bear in mind during the debate that this site is within a designated employment area in the local plan. Would anyone care to move a proposal? Councillor Buttle?
I suppose we accept this, but with a green roof. If we can ask for that, that would be if we can ask our development officer to come up with a bit of a net gain and improve the community. I'd love that. Thank you.
In suggesting that, what would your view be if the applicant refuses to do that?
Well, I guess that's their choice, isn't it? I guess, should we ask Sean to
just want to be absolutely certain that this is something which we're 100% confident could be technically achieved on a metal structure?
Well, I would trust Sean to be able to identify the possibility of including a green roof.
Through you, Chair, if I may. I mean, if members are so minded, if that's the actual route members want to go down, and that's something that could be delegated for discussions to be had with the applicant to secure an appropriate form of or mode or actual design of a green roof structure.
So you're making, could you just make sure we're fully aware of your slightly amended proposal, Neil?
I'm absolutely fine with Sean being our officer in charge of making this work in the best way possible, including a green roof, to my mind.
So I'm going to ask Tommy to note that down as a concise form of wording to add to a condition. Do we have a seconder, Councillor Slack?
Yes, Chair, I'll second it, provided metal's a bit different to felt roof, isn't it? You know, will it grip on metal? That's what you've got to ask yourself. But I will second this. It's a good idea, and it's a way forward which will stop a lot of noise for the residents when the rain's pouring down on the roof. So, yeah, I'll second that.
Councillor Shelley.
I think Sean wants to say something.
Sorry, Chair, just trying to get your attention. If this is something that members are happy for us to negotiate with the applicant, I mean, the likelihood of it remaining a metal roof is very slim. It's probably going to be other materials used for the roof in order to accommodate and take a green roof planting and appropriate element on it. So whilst the actual external appearance, the elevations are likely to remain the same material, the roof itself will probably be adapted to accommodate that form of planting and secure it in perpetuity, as it were.
Can I just clarify then, if this is to become a condition and if the applicant doesn't agree with that and it's not possible to negotiate with them, would that mean that this item would then come back to a future committee? I would hope it would in that situation.
I mean, yes, I mean, that's something, it's a specific word, and there's two options. We could try and negotiate it and then impose a condition that would require those details to be agreed prior to commencement and development on the site. If the applicant were not minded to try and achieve that, then they could apply for variation of the condition, which is very lengthy. However, if they're not or don't want to engage with the authority to achieve that, which I don't necessarily want to suggest that is the case, then yes, we'd certainly have to bring it back. But I'm sure that the applicant would probably be welcoming of certain suggestions and probably look at accommodating something like this, as it would improve the green credentials of the site and or the probably marketability of the site itself.
If I may, I think the specification for a green roof is between 6 and 13 degrees for the availability of drainage. If I'm wrong and this building is out of that, I don't know whether or not that's something we could take into account or whether you just have to walk away. I don't know. I'm not quite sure how we would deal with this because it's probably a little bit more technical than it looks.
I think, colleagues, it is technical, and I'm going to ask Councillor Lees to come in a moment. I think it is technical. Those of us who have green roofs are aware of the load-bearing implications of green roofs, and I'm not sure that it's as simple as saying, yes, let's have a green roof. But Stuart, would you like to offer your technical?
Totally agree, Chair. Totally different construction method. You're probably looking at another 500 mil higher to get that construction work in, to get the green roof. So you're gaining one aspect but losing another. So I think we're looking at a totally different scenario with the build situation from what we've got on the application before us. So it'll be a totally different construction method to hold that green roof up. It's going to want some substantial steel work or concrete. If you remember, we had one a few months ago with a concrete roof and a green roof, and you've got a lot of construction costs and a lot of work to get something like that in place. So I think we're diversing from the application before us, and I'm not 100% with the green roof situation. Thank you.
Right, we do formally have a proposal seconded to ask our officers to negotiate for a different roof form. I'm just concerned with setting ourselves up as a hostage to fortune here. However, we will proceed with those recommendations. We have Councillor Dobbs.
I was going to propose another condition, but perhaps if the original proposer likes to listen to what I'm suggesting and maybe modifies, I would have thought the more important is to maintain or increase the screening in view of what the residents have said. I mean, there is an embryonic hedge. If we could condition planting along that line, then much of this wouldn't be seen. And in terms of their metal boxes, well, of course, that's exactly what parks along there at the moment, in metal boxes. Admittedly, what we're proposing is more permanent, but arguably more aesthetic.
Stuart, did you want to come back in? List, that's all.
I'm on your list again. Not really, no, but are we taking Neil's proposal as an amendment then to the application?
We're taking Neil and Peter's proposal. If that's not approved, we will go back to the original recommendation.
That's fine by me.
Can I come in, Chair? Sorry, through you, Chair. If we do want to remove the condition regarding a green roof, then that would be best done as an amendment now, prior to the vote on that, because if we vote down Councillor Buttle's proposal, then we've voted down the recommendations and to approve the application. So we wouldn't then be able to go back and vote for that.
Chair, information.
Point of information from Councillor Hughes.
I think I did a bit of trigonometry, and the slope is less than 6 degrees, so I don't think it's a flyer.
Right, well, there's no sign of any movement from Councillor Buttle or Councillor Slack, so I'm in your hands, colleagues, if someone wants to move an amendment. Otherwise, we will proceed voting on this proposal. Councillor Dobbs, you want to complete your intervention?
Can I move an amendment that is the same as the original proposal, but with my extra bit on planting? Is that viable? Does that fly?
Yes, through your Chairman, we can ask for landscaping conditions or additional landscaping to be agreed prior to the installation of the actual units.
Right, do anyone want to second that amendment? Councillor Bates?
To second that, Chair.
You want to speak? No. Okay.
Second that proposal.
Right, we now have we're into a new set of proposals now, so you can all speak again if you wish to. Anyone want to make any comment? Councillor Buttle?
Just to say, perhaps we could just allow Sean to try and get a green roof and some shielding, and if he can't get it, he can't get it.
Well, we have an amendment. Does anyone we would need someone to second that if you want to put it forward as an amendment. Are you putting forward it as an amendment to the amendment, Neil?
Well, I hope not.
It's 26 minutes past 8.
I don't want it to go on forever.
Right, let's just count to 10. We've got an amended proposal moved and seconded, which we are now going to vote on, and we'll see what happens.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come in? Councillor Dobbs, your amendment to Councillor Buttle's proposal, does that include, is that taking out the green roof and replacing it with changes to the...
It does, for all intents and
Okay.
purposes, yes. Yes, thank you.
Are we all clear? Are you clear, Sean?
We're not voting for a green roof, basically.
No.
Through you, Chair, I think basically what the discussion, if I've followed it correctly, which I hope I have, is effectively the recommendation as written, albeit with the addition of a requirement for landscaping to be submitted to and agreed in writing by officers. Okay.
That's correct, yes.
Seconded by Councillor Bates. Right, all those in favour of that amendment, please show. All those not in favour, against, please show. Is anyone abstaining? Right, so that amendment is carried, and now becomes the substantive motion. Someone would like to read out the substantive motion, Tommy, please.
Thank you, Chair. As I understand, it's the recommendations as written in the report with an additional condition relating to the improving the level of screening around the site. But I think Sean might have a bit more planning-based wording.
He did
for that
indeed,
condition.
yes. But it's on the road that's basically the rear of where these are going to go.
Yes.
There already is a bit of hedge, and I think in some places it would completely screen the proposal, but not entirely. And so if it could be improved, and certainly not cut down.
Right, all those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. And any abstentions? One abstention, so that is carried, and the application is therefore approved, subject to that additional condition. Right, we'll move on to our next application, which is in Darley Dale, Red House Stables, the installation of concrete foundation pad and the siting of a railway goods wagon with surrounding decking. We have a speaker here this evening to talk to the application. It is Mr. Peter Burns, who is the agent. Mr. Burns, you've got 5 minutes to address us, please.
Good evening, everybody. Mr. Russell purchased Red House Stables in December 2019, since which time he has been embarked upon a scheme of phased improvements. And with support from planning for his proposals and recent planning permissions granted, he will now progress with further site improvements, which we believe will benefit the general locality and improve the general amenity for all. That is himself, his extended family, friends and visitors to his antiques and vintage business, whilst also increasing amenity for the neighbouring properties within this old road enclave. The redundant equestrian premises bought in 2019 were tired and dilapidated, but we hope visiting committee members will have noted the direction Mr. Russell is moving the site towards by breathing new life into Red House Stables. Specifically regarding the railway cabin installation, with permission hopefully granted, Mr. Russell will install the surrounding decking viewing platform, and the completed installation will be enjoyed by himself, his family and a handful of friends. Mr. Russell is a railway enthusiast. The cabin is sited to enjoy peak rail steam engines passing through the cutting, which he looks down upon. We have received a letter of support from Peak Rail's operations manager, which we make available to the planning case officer. The manager received favourable comment from drivers and numerous tourist passengers and believes Mr. Russell's refurbished goods cabin in its location benefits the locality and the Peak Rail attraction itself. The cabin was purchased from Peak Rail in a serious state of decay, and Mr. Russell has invested considerable time and money in the successful restoration. We believe it fits seamlessly with the surrounding landscape and environment. We ask committee to note that with Peak Rail agreement, Mr. Russell now cuts down and maintains the railway cutting's northern bank to the entire perimeter of the Red House Stables southwest boundary. He has recently installed new fencing along 3/4 of this boundary and has purchased materials and is currently intending to install replacement post and rail fencing all along the remaining frontage between the goods cabin and the railway embankment. This is at his own cost and with grateful thanks from Peak Rail, who actually own the fencing. Mr. Russell and his partner have 2 daughters with partners and 5 grandchildren who all live locally and visit Red House Stables on a daily basis. They stable 2 horses upon site and use the property's paddock for exercising the horses. The paddock also accommodates various hens, cockerels and 3-number pygmy goats. Mr. Russell is a collector and associates with 4 or 5 other dealer friends who again visit on a daily basis for tea, biscuits and dealer chat. He has thus created a pleasant family and friends community culture upon site. The railway cabin is intended to be a relaxation and meeting point for this family-based unit, enjoying this mixed-use site. In response to inquiry from visiting committee members, Mr. Russell wishes to give assurance that there will be no commercial intention for the use of the cabin facility now or at any future date, which, if permitted, will reside within the garden of his future family home. He also acknowledges that together with this proposed house, his antiques business, paddock, existing stable, future stabling and workshop will, by way of planning conditions, remain as one combined unit, never to be separated for sale as individual parcels. Finally, he acknowledges his error in assuming the cabin would not require planning permission, this explaining the fact that he purchased the cabin in its dilapidated state from Peak Rail just 1 week before I, his agent, had arranged and confirmed an on-site pre-planning enquiry meeting with the Derbyshire Dale Senior Planning Officer. So on the day we actually met, it was a big surprise for me to see the foundation that Mr. Russell had cast a couple of days before in his ignorance of planning law. So we apologise for that. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burns. You forgot to mention the 3 very fine guinea pigs we saw yesterday as well. Right. Sean, are you introducing this?
Thank you, Chair. So, as mentioned, this is an application for the retention of the concrete foundation and the siting of the former railway goods wagon and decking yet to be installed. So the application site, members will recall, we have visited this site. This is the second time we visited this site, the first one for the outline application for a dwelling. The red square to the bottom left-hand corner of the site that runs parallel with the railway embankment. That is the actual site of the actual railway carriage and the concrete foundation. Again, just the shot that shows that. These are the drawings that illustrate the actual railway carriage. Members that were able to attend the site visit yesterday will have seen the railway cabin, albeit without the decking installed. In the fact that this is an application, part retention for the pad, the railway carriage, and with the decking to be installed, subject to the application in front of members this evening. Again, some elevations of the actual cabin, and also you can see from there the actual extent of the decking, which is going to wrap around the actual wrap around the actual units, the actual railway carriage. These are some photographs to show the main entrance to the site. The cabin itself is to the railway carriage, it's the rear of the site. These are just photographs, or a photograph of the railway carriage itself in situ. And again, this area between the cabin, keep calling it cabin, railway carriage, and the actual fence post, there's going to be a new fence line installed, but between the area, the soil area at the moment, there will be decking. And again, this is just an outlook from where the decking will be of the railway line itself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. Do we have questions from members? Councillor Stack?
Have we finished with questions now?
Yeah. Is that is an interesting question in itself?
Yeah. Nobody else. If you have finished, I'll move this, Chair.
Do we have any more questions? No, the answer to your question is no, we don't. So you may, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Member. Yeah, I'll move this, Chair, because this is a really lovely setting. It's the characteristic of this carriage right against the railway as the Peak Railway run up and down, and passengers will look across to this redundant carriage, and the decking right. It's a super project, and I fully support this, and it's an asset to this particular area. You know, it'll really enjoy the passengers passing, because as the agent said, as the railway go past, they'll wave to them on in the carriage, and it's a good atmosphere and a good family thing to do, really. So I'm pleased to move this, Chair.
Chair, I'm happy to second that. I totally agree with Councillor Slag, and it's an appropriate feature. And I think the applicant should be congratulated in one sense, because, I mean, you know, he is trying his best to ensure that everything that he's doing on this site complies with what is expected. And I'm pleased that we had the site visit. We were able to see on site how well he's restored this carriage. And the concept of the sliding glass for his family and friends to then look across. I mean, it is a beautiful view from that aspect, so I can understand utterly why, you know, he's wanting to do this.
All right, so your recommendation's been moved and seconded. Any further contributions? No, we move to a vote. You note that condition 2 requires the development to be completed within 6 months. I think that's a helpful condition there. Right, all those in favour of the recommendation, please show. And that is unanimous, so that is carried and the application is approved, subject to those conditions. Right, move on to our final application this evening, which is in Bonsall. This is just north of Ember Lane. The erection of one dwelling house with some associated works to the site. We have a number of, before we move to the speakers, of which we have 2, we've got some late representations which I'd ask you to have a look at on your sheet. It's on page 1 actually, item 5.5, starts at the bottom of page 1. Just before I ask Mrs. Greaves to come and speak, I've been reminded that we're past the bewitching hours, so I need someone to move an extension of time for half an hour. Councillor Lees, Councillor Dobbs, all in favour, please show. That's approved unanimously, thank you. Mrs. Greaves, would you like to come up and speak? Mrs. Greaves is a local resident who's going to speak against the application. And you have 3 minutes, Mrs. Greaves.
Thank you. Good evening and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am indeed Brenda Greaves and I live at 23 Church Street, Bonsall. My husband and I were astonished that we were not included on the consultation list and have so far not received an explanation for this, particularly as the proposed site adjoins our property. The plan appears to include a portion of our garden. This area was purchased 25 years ago and change of use was granted. The red brick outhouse described is actually within our garden boundary. The plan of the proposed property shows building abutting our garden boundary wall. Obviously, door or window openings on the west wall of the property would not be legal. The proposed construction materials are inappropriate in a conservation area and do not enhance the conservation area. The height of the proposed building dominates the surrounding properties. There is no indication of any existing watercourse and how they could be affected. The applicant has not responded to any of our concerns in their additional information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Greaves. Right, second speaker speaking on behalf of the applicant is Miss Samantha Taylor, who's going to speak in favour of the application. Samantha, you have 5 minutes to speak then.
I am the daughter of the applicant, Mr. Philip Bohm, and wanted to provide some information about the application. The site has been in my mother's family since around the 1970s. She inherited it in 2002 when her father passed away. My parents are farmers and are currently diversifying due to health reasons after a cattle accident. This property would be a retirement home for them, as both of them lived in Bonsall since birth. They would like to remain in the village, close to their family and support network. They currently live on a farm within the village. This is no longer suitable for them to spend their retirement, hence the desire to form a new self-built dwelling close to their original roots. The area of land in which the dwelling is proposed historically sited a caravan with a permanent resident that kept an eye on the cattle. This was approximately in the 1980s to 1990s. This piece of land has never been used for agricultural purposes. The access track and driveway is currently used daily by farm vehicles for access to the land. There is a public footpath which goes up the track, which would remain open during and post-construction. Some neighbours within the village use this for unauthorised car parking and unloading shopping and picking up children from school. The use of vehicles in and out of the drive would be minimal and no more than any other car on Church Street coming out of their driveway. The access road leads only to my parents' land. We would ideally like to have sought pre-application advice prior to a planning application taking place. However, Derbyshire Dales District Council had stopped this service. At the time, this was not available. We would like to comment that one of the planners did see my father at the site whilst considering a separate application at the farm and gave the informal opinion that the land could be considered infill and that a new dwelling could be acceptable within in principle. We have designed and proposed the dwelling to have the least impact on the surrounding neighbourhood and surroundings as possible. We are aware that Bonsall is a small village and any new development may provide contentious. It is a 1.5-storey modest-sized home. It is not out of scale with other properties on Church Street, which has a host of different-sized homes. This is by no means as large as some. It has 3 bedrooms downstairs and a modest kitchen diner and a snug within the eaves upstairs. The main view from the house will be onto the field, not facing any neighbours. We have no windows facing onto number 31 Church Street. We note concerns that the north dormer overlooks number 33. We would be happy to make this obscure glazing or even remove the dormer if needs be to replace with Velux windows which follow the slope of the roof line and which would not overlook anyone. We're also aware that there have been comments about the proposed siting higher than other surrounding dwellings. It is worth noting that within the area and the house is proposed, the surrounding settlement is all built in a very tight-knit arrangement. The land on which it is designed is upon a slope, but so are all the other properties within the area, notably the dwellings on Ember Lane, which all rise above one another away from Church Street, which is no different from any other property on a hill within the Derbyshire Dales. In terms of the proposed materials for the dwelling, we have suggested local stone combined with a metal standing seam. The idea being that it ties in sensitively with the surrounding stone houses as much as possible, whilst taking a nod to the fact that it is on the edge of an agricultural land, hence the metal standing seam. However, if the agricultural slant is deemed unacceptable, we will be more than happy to alter this to a stone and slate property to blend fully with the local vernacular, more like number 31, which is deemed to enhance the conservation area. The wider land attached to the proposal is an agricultural holding. The actual footprint of the dwelling does not encroach this, nor does the parking area. A small portion of the agricultural land has been assumed for garden for the proposal, though we are happy to adjust this area if necessary. There is very little in way of ecological value on the existing site. We would be happy to provide bird and bat boxes, create hedgehog highways and create a landscaping scheme which satisfies a net biodiversity gain. We would be happy to specify driveway and parking finishes as fumable surfaces. Unfortunately, whilst the project has been in planning and notwithstanding the fact we did not have pre-application advice, we have been unable to enter into any conversations with the planners about how we could alter the design to make it more acceptable prior to this consultation. It would be a new, well-designed dwelling situated within an existing settlement for a local couple to reside in, my parents. I hope that now it has been made clear that the development is not for commercial gain nor a holiday home, and we are willing to be flexible with our proposals, that you are happy to support my parents within their endeavour to stay within the village. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. That was a very well-constructed presentation. Thank you. Miles or Sean, you're introducing the application, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as has been mentioned, this is an erection of a singular dwelling on land to the north of Ember Lane, Bonsall. The application site is, as you can see in front of you now, this is a better view of the site. As you can see, the red line extends and includes, as you go up the track, or proposed driveway, the property is going to be on the left. And as you project further past the property, that's where the turning head and radii is going to be for the vehicles that actually will be serving the property, together with the parking area and the garden area, amenity area will be split into two parcels that immediately joining the property, and that a little bit further, just past where the vehicular turning area is going to be. These are just some elevations that show the actual proposed development in terms of its the vernacular, in terms of the materials that are going to be used, as been highlighted by the applicant's daughter. And again, as you can see, it's it's not a traditional two-story, it's a two-story property, but it's not a traditional two-story property in the accommodations within the roof slope. These are just some photographs that basically illustrate the actual site itself. If I can just, so this is the actual site where the application or the proposed unit is going to be, the dwelling, with the stone wall to the right of the actual photograph. This is just looking back towards, from where the actual dwelling is going to be, back towards stone wall and to the access point off to the right. This is the, trying to familiarise myself, this is the part of the site, but this is part of the residential garden area and turning area. The metal rails to the right-hand side delineate the portion of the rear edge of where the actual parking area and turning area is going to be, or proposed to be. And again, this is just the stone wall with the area to the behind the actual metal railing is the first part, or the larger of the amenity space for the property. Sorry, and that's the actual site. Thank you, Chair. If I just draw members' attention back to the site layout. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I'll open up to questions. First, a question from me, Sean. Can you just confirm that your recommendation is that the site is in principle not suitable for residential accommodation?
That's correct, Chair, in terms of 82 of the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the photographs of the site, is the red brick building at the bottom of the site, is that part of the site or outside the site? red brick building at the bottom. The picture there.
I don't believe it is, no.
So didn't one of the speakers mention the red brick building?
That's within, well, it's been put forward for members' consideration by a resident. That's not part of the actual site.
It's not part of the site,
No.
the red brick building.
No.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Dobbs?
Thank you. Just to clarify, I think you probably answered this in what you previously said, but this is not classed as infill then, despite what Joe Baldwin said.
I mean, obviously, I can't speak for somebody that
No.
works for the authority. I can't even I'm not proposing to speculate. But certainly, as it's been assessed by the officer in terms of the development, that it's inappropriate development and it's not considered, in this particular instance, to be something that we can support as officers. So, no, not infill.
Right, and so then in your reasons for refusal, it's incongruous, and then there are 6 descriptions: siting, design, form, scale, mass, and materials. Is it all of those or some of those? I think because the applicant got no pre-application guidance, this might be helpful.
So yes, through you, Chair. I mean, it was unfortunate the application came forward at the time when the authority had suspended the pre-application advice. I mean, that's been re-established now that the actual the planning team's been repopulated, as it were, in terms of officers. However, yes, to confirm, or to come back to your point, that it is the actual siting, design, form, scale, mass and material, so it's all of those.
Further questions? If not, we'll go into debate. We have a officer recommendation to refuse for the reasons that Councillor Dobbs has just enunciated. Or would anyone like to move a proposal, please?
Chair, in the light of the officer report, and I would urge members to look at the comments of the local parish council. You know, the parish councils meet, they spend good time putting together very relevant points. So in the light of the officer report, and from what I saw on the site visit, I'm not at all comfortable with this particular application, and I would want to move refusal.
Do we have a seconder to that? Councillor Shelley? Would you like to speak now or later, or not at all?
I have no wish to speak.
Any further contributions? Councillor Slack.
Yes, Chair. I take the opposite view to David. Not very often I do that. I think this is a little site which will easily accommodate a small building with the bedrooms and the roof. I don't think it's out of keeping, though it's in the conservation area. I think it's really infill, really. So it's an ideal site for a nice little dwelling there, and I don't think it'd conflict with nobody, really. So I have not much against this at all, Chair. Thank you.
Any further contributions? No, move to vote. I'm going to abstain on this application because I fully understand the reasons for refusal relating to the design of the structure, but I'm yet to be convinced that the site itself is not appropriate for some form of development appropriate to the village, so I shall not be voting.
Chair, can I ask a question at this stage about that? Perhaps to Sean. Sean said that he felt that it wasn't, in principle, a site that could be used for residential, but that doesn't form part of the recommendation, officer's recommendation. So that is a new point in this meeting. And my assumption is that we are not saying that it's that it is not suitable in principle. We're just saying this particular case is not suitable.
Did try and ask Sean.
Yeah, you
that
did.
question.
I heard you say that. But
can you just clarify that, Sean?
Sorry, Chair, if I can come back on that point, yes. Forgive me. The reason or how the actual refusal is worded in this particular proposal, because of all it boils back down to the impact on the conservation area, the massing of the materials and what was mentioned, the scale and so forth, that then means that the principle is unacceptable. Yes, you are correct. You could tease that out and say the principle of this form of development or this proposal in front of members is deemed to be unacceptable. So, contrary to what I have said already, I'll want to retract that and say that it is clear that within that wording, as it's stated here by the officer, were members to go along with that, it's not saying at some point something may not be appropriate, but what's in front of members this evening is considered to be inappropriate.
So if the applicant chose to come back with an alternative proposal with stone and a slate roof and traditional design, that might be viewed that could be assessed again. We're not going to reject that assessment.
I'd probably maybe not go as far as that. I'd probably say that something else could be discussed. I mean, I wouldn't want to steer a particular design at this point in terms of materials, design, height and so forth, other than what's there at the moment is considered to be inappropriate.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, and that changes my my voting intention. Right, all those in favour of the recommendation to refuse, please show. Those against? And an abstention? So that motion is carried. The recommendation, as stated in the reasons, is refused. The application is refused. To our final item, item 6, the progress report on the various planning appeals. I don't know whether, Sean, you want to make any comment on any of these?
No, Chair.
That's fine. Anyone wish to comment on the report? Councillor Maelstrom.
I've just got a question actually on the appeals. There are 2 appeals in the report that we lost, one in Brailsford and one at Old Hackney Lane. On both those appeals, the appellants had planning consultants and specialist barristers acting for them, and I see that our team went in without equality of arms, really, with no counsel instructed, and I just wondered why that was.
What tends to happen, what has been unfortunately happening, not just here but other authorities, is a lot of applicants or agents are instructing barristers to come along. I mean, they don't have to indicate to a council, in a particular case ourselves, that they intend to bring a barrister along with them. On occasion, some do, and it's at that point whether or not we decide whether or not we take someone from our legal colleagues along, or then a barrister, or if we think or consider the strength of our case to be sufficient. I mean, the spectre in the room is that every time we will bring a barrister along, it does add an extremely large cost to every single informal hearing. I mean, many moons ago, and Miles will probably concur with me, informal hearings, basically just the 2 sides, the applicant's agent or the applicant and the actual officers. There wasn't any barristers normally involved in these type of cases. That was tend to be reserved for public inquiries. Now, unfortunately, there has been, over the last few years, a change in the tide, I'm afraid. And so that's something that we will have to consider as an authority, that which ones we may well want to, or potentially instruct, to have a barrister along.
Thank you, Laura, for making that point. Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. We've got a couple of residents from Brailsford. I know this is probably stretching a point. Would they be allowed to say anything? They understand and accept the result, and they know that we can't do anything about it because we've been here before. But maybe if they could have the opportunity just to share a few words, I'm sure they'd be very respectful.
It would have been helpful if you'd asked me beforehand, Dermot, but yes, I'm happy if I'll allow one resident to speak for 3 minutes then.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair and committee. We're not here on behalf of the Parish Council. We're here as independent residents. We did have a meeting at the Parish Council last week to express our dismay about the appeal decision and the point raised here by Councillor Maelstrom about the strong representation, legal representation, given that the appellant presented to you. We are dismayed about the issue and the planning inspector has made on the principle of development with respect to being anything that is on the edge of the settlement boundary. And furthermore, we wanted to establish whether there was any possibility for the committee and the planning department to impose any additional conditions with respect to the development, given that it's obviously going ahead. With respect to greening of the area, protection of the pathway, the landscape as you visited it and seen it, it's approaching the church. And if there was some screening for significant screening to protect the view and aspect of the church, so the church was not looking, and those using the church, the cemetery, etc., were not looking at the housing development on the site. I don't know if that's something that's possible. And furthermore, one other point that was strongly felt was the issue of the democratic process that the village residents had gone through to develop the Brailsford neighbourhood plan seems to be completely have been overruled and not taken into consideration. And that element of not engaging in a democratic process has caused a lot of upset and agitation within our community. I know that's not something exclusive to Brailsford. Obviously, we're hearing that other appeals and other local communities are being overruled. But we don't feel that we can take this matter lying down. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm afraid we can't enter into debate, and many of us may share your sentiments. When the planning inspector issues his decision, he effectively grants planning permission subject to the conditions he set out in his appeal statement. So there the matter rests, I'm afraid. But we do take on, I'm sure speaking on behalf of everyone, we share the concerns that you and your community have raised. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would someone like to move receipt of the appeal statement? Councillor Dobbs? Councillor Murphy? All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's carried unanimously. And that completes our business for the evening. So thank you for your attention over the past 3 hours and have a safe journey home.